Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Microsoft Forms training session this afternoon. My name is Martin and I'll be working with you. Just a little bit of organisation first. We will be recording today's session and the recording has just begun. So if you do turn your camera on, please be aware that this session will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. You are able to ask questions during the session and I'll have various pause points as we progress through the training. You can either ask me then by unmuting your mic, or you can place a question into the conversation, which is on the meetings bar, and it looks like a little speech bubble. And then every so often, I'll pop back over and pick those up and do my best to answer them. I'm just going to swap screens in a moment. But before we do, one of the things that we are very proud of is that we work with Microsoft, and the training this afternoon is delivered in conjunction with Microsoft. We would like to offer you the opportunity to get accredited for joining this afternoon's training and get what's called Microsoft Educator status. And you can go to the Microsoft Education Centre, and then at the end of this session, I will give you a code to redeem once you're logged in the Microsoft Education Centre, and you can become a certified Microsoft Innovative Educator, or an MIE. That'll be equivalent to about an hour's worth of study, but by coming on this training session, you can get that for free. So I'll share you the code for that later, but just to re-emphasize, you need to open a web browser, search for Microsoft Education Centre. Then, as you can see from those two fingers pointing at the screenshot from the web browser, there's a sign in button in the top right hand corner. You can sign in with either your school email address, or if you've got an account already, sign in. And then at the end of the session, I will show you just how to get started in redeeming the points we're going to give you, and you'll instantly become a certified MIE. Some schools have found this particularly useful in joining future training sessions, and we are currently running the next step on from becoming a certified MIE, which is becoming a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. And on that course, you can look at all the different aspects of Office 365 and how they can positively impact across your school. Without any further delay then, the agenda for today is quite open, but we're going to look at two distinct areas of working with Microsoft Forms. The first is to build a questionnaire type form, and usually that's questions around harvesting data or collecting data into the school. Sometimes that might be used for a non-teaching and learning focus. You also could use it in the classroom just as well. And then on the flip side, in the classroom, you've got an additional option open to you, and that's called a Microsoft Forms quiz. And they're really good for using within a lesson for an activity, and it saves you trying to collate and manage data separately. We'll discuss how we share forms, and we'll touch upon how to use some of the advanced features, which is Microsoft Forms Pro. And as I said at the beginning, we will end up offering a chance to ask questions as we progress through. So I'm just going to jump out of the presentation for you a minute and swap across to a different program where I've got forms open and ready to go. So you'll now see a different window. For those people that aren't used to using Microsoft Forms, when you first log into Office 365, you're either going to come here, which is called the Office 365 landing page, where you can pick up files you've recently edited, and the apps that you'll be using are down the side vertically. If you use it quite a lot and you log in, usually as well if you're a member of staff, you may end up going straight into your Outlook email online. It doesn't matter either way. You can pick up the Forms app from there on the left hand side, or you can go to the app launcher in the top left hand corner, and when you press the app launcher in the top left hand corner, usually Forms is here at the top. If you don't find it in this instant list there, you click on all apps, and then alphabetically everything is organized, and you'll find Microsoft Forms in the list there. When you click on it, it will open up another tab in your web browser. So Forms is web-based. Web browsers that are useful to use, the Microsoft Edge browser that I'm using today is really reliable. You could additionally use the Google Chrome browser or Firefox. It doesn't work particularly well on older web browsers. So if you're still using a Windows 7 computer and you've got Internet Explorer browser, which used to be the Microsoft browser, Forms will play up on there. So download the Edge browser, one of the new browsers, and then that will allow you to get started. Once we're here in the Microsoft Forms page, where you come to first of all is if you've been using this for a little bit, you will start to see forms that you've recently used. So there's 3 tabs here. The recent tabs show me the ones that I've edited in the last month. If I'm using a form quite a lot, maybe it's to substitute as an admissions form for schools. So I've got quite a few schools that started in the admin team. Instead of having to send out paper-based admission forms, they're using Microsoft Forms to gather data in from parents. So if it's something that I use frequently, I might pin it here. So it's one of my favorites effectively. But you can share forms with each other, and we'll show you how to do that from an editing perspective. And anything that's shared with you as a form that you've got editing rights to will then come up on the shared with me tab. So recent, pinned and shared with me. If you're going to start on a new quiz, the button is there. You've also got the drop down on the side there for a new form. So quizzes explicitly for teaching and learning in classroom use. Forms could be whole school use, including in the classroom. So they're dual purpose. We will start today by building a blank form, and then we'll come back and look at a couple of the examples that we've got here for us. If you want to get out of the view where you're looking at your recently viewed forms and you want to see all of them, down at the bottom here there's an all forms hyperlink, and when you click that you'll get through to everything that you've got as a form that you've created and that you own. You can either view those by preview boxes or you can get a list. I find it quite useful to have the boxes because you get a sense of what's in the top line and you can start to see a little bit of it. Anything that's been deleted recently will be stored in the deleted forms tab for 30 days. If you want to delete a form, just click the 3 dots that are down there at the bottom, and then that allows you to duplicate a form if you'd like to. You can move it elsewhere if you want to organize them into folders, but you can delete them there, and that's when it will sit in the deleted forms. So just a quick overview of how you navigate the whole Office 365 Forms app itself. Now I'm going to make a new form, so I'm going to click on the new form button and it will open up another web browser, and there we go. So this is the default starting format. As it stands, it will automatically be saving all the time, so you don't need to worry about saving it. The first thing you're going to get is a title bar. So it might be, we're going to call this a well-being survey. And then we're going to give a description. We would be interested in understanding how lockdown is going. If I type this afternoon. And the description box is really for setting the scene, just giving people a little bit more depth as to why you're going to be asking the question or why they're receiving the survey. You can make it look less bland. Up here, there is an image button. So if I wanted to insert an image, I don't need to go to another tab in my web browser. Everything stays within Forms, so you stay in the one hub. You've got a built-in image search there. So let's type well-being. And I think we'll just grab that image there and press add. So what we should get in there in a minute is a picture of well-being. It doesn't like that file type. Let's try again. Occasionally you get that if it's an obscure file type. Let's have that one there and see if that one goes in okay. And it will pop it in there for you. You can also upload them from your computer if you've got an image on your computer. There we go. So there's the image that's come in. If you want to get rid of it again, you can delete it. If you want to have alternative text that goes in there, you can just type on the box and there you go. So that's my title, it's my subheading, there's an image. Then we're ready to start adding questions. To add a question in underneath your title, you press the add new box. You've got various different types of questions, and I'll run you through those in a little bit so you can see some real examples. But there are more hidden types on the arrow down on the side, so you can get all of those types there. You can also split up your form into different sections. One of the things that I'd advise you to do is not make your form too big. If somebody comes to a form that's been sent to them and it looks huge, oh, it's got 50 questions, the first thing it's going to do is put them off. If you break it up into sections, then by introducing a section, they only see a small amount of forms at once. So section 1, we're going to call all about you. And we won't give that a description this time, but under section 1, we're going to pop in a multiple choice question. So in it goes. So there's my section heading, all about you. And it might be, when do you learn the best. So we want to know. So then we could say, well, morning. It could be afternoon. It might be that we want to have some other options. Now, forms will be smart and it will try and suggest to save you typing in what the next option is. So you can either take a suggestion, there might be more than one here, or you can go to add option and you can add one manually. So I'm going to say evening. And you can, if you wish, have an other option there, and that allows people to pop in another answer other than the ones that you've defined for them. So at the moment, they would have to pick one of those choices. But what you can do with questions, and particularly the multiple choice questions, is you can say, well, I'm going to allow more than one answer to be entered in here. So if you slide that button across there, that now changes it from the circular boxes, which means you can only choose one, to the square boxes, which means you can choose more than one. So you might say, well, actually, I do okay in the morning and the evening, but the afternoons are just terrible for me, so I won't tick that box. If you want to as well, to stop people moving through and not giving you the information you require, you can toggle on the required button there. And then that means if they try and submit the form at the end and the required question hasn't been answered, it will remind them of that. It will highlight the question they've missed answering in red, and then it will ask them to go back and put an answer in. So it depends on what you're going to do and whether you want to enforce that. If you know there's a piece of information that you can't do without, then it's quite useful to have that in there. You've got other hidden options down in the bottom corner, and if you click those, you have the option to shuffle questions, and shuffling questions is quite good if you are using them in a classroom. Being an ex-teacher myself, I know that pupils quite readily look over each other's shoulders, so if I want to make things a little bit more interesting for them, then not all have the answers, also all the questions in the same order, then it's good to shuffle them. You can add a subtitle, so that's like the subheading or the description that we had at the top there, or you can switch that off depending on how you like it to be. And something we will show you a little bit later is branching. Well, that means if they answered question one and they said afternoon, it might take them to one question. If they said morning, it might take them to another question, so they don't have to flow through questions that aren't really relevant to them. So you've got branching options. I'll show you how to set up branching a little bit later in the training. If we're happy with that question, we might add another question in. So this time here, we'll put a text box, and in here it might be, please explain your learning styles. We don't need a subtitle for that, and then they would have a box to type into. If we know that we're going to expect more than a short sentence, then toggle long answer in, and it will give you a bigger space for the person answering the question. I'm going to leave that as required. And now you'll see we've got other options at the top. So if we've got a question and we think we're going to be able to reuse it and just subtly change it, you've got a copy question button, and what that will do is it will duplicate the question that you've got in there at the moment. If you realize it's a mistake and you didn't wish to have that question, you can press the delete button. I'm going to leave my question in, and you can reorder questions by moving them up and down with the arrow. So there you go. What was my second question is now my first question. If I realize I made a mistake, I can pop it back down again. So you can reorder them and move them backwards and forwards. If I decided that was going to be all there was in section one, I can press add new, drop down the arrow on the side, and then choose to add section two. And section two might be, I don't know, the school. And then we're going to ask you about how the school could support you. So you're starting to build your questionnaire, and you just carry on until you've got all the questions you want to gather the data that you need. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not quite sure how this is going to look for somebody else. And there's a way to check on that as you're working. At the moment, the view that we're seeing is an editor's view. It's how it would appear to you, but it's not how it would appear to the person who receives it in the end. So we go to the preview button in the top bar, and we click preview, and it will tell us this is how it will look by somebody viewing on a computer. And you can see then what the flow of the questionnaire would look like. This is section one. There's the button to go next. And when I submitted my answers and it went on to the next section, I would go to section two, and then I would see the bit that said about the school. As you can see, I'm moving around here. I get an icon that pops up. It's there. It's down here. That's called Immersive Reader. And if you know that you often have to amend questionnaires that are going out to parents, because maybe you have different primary language speakers in your school, or maybe you also have parents or pupils with learning needs, and then they can't always access web weighty text in the survey. You can use Immersive Reader by pressing that, and it's built into pretty much all of Office 365, and it converts it into a reader mode. And once you're in the reader mode, you can have Immersive Reader read the form to you as an individual. It doesn't change it for anyone else accessing the form, it just changes it for you. So if you press play,
well-being survey, we would be interested,
and it will read it out to the individual. You can, as an individual as well, you can change the size of the text. If you needed larger text because you're visually impaired, you can adjust it for that. You could also change the font style that you're having it read in. A lot of people find the Comic Sans is quite friendly because it looks like handwriting. If you had a visual impairment and actually yellow didn't work for you, but you needed a pale green background, you can change that around. You've got all these different colors here, and you can keep it formatted as the source that you read it from, or you can get rid of the source formatting and switch it off. For lessons, I find it particularly useful because I can have pupils to mark up aspects of the text around grammar and punctuation. So you can have your nouns, you can have your verbs, you can have your adjectives, and you can toggle them on and off. And as they go off, they disappear from the text. You can also have them labeled up, so you can see you've got N for noun and V for verb. But if I didn't want them to be labeled, I can take that away by switching off the labels. And then over here, reading preferences. If I knew I had somebody with dyslexia, it's quite a bit of text on the page, so then they might find that hard. It might be moving around for them and it's difficult to focus on the line they're reading. So you insert a line focus, and then that will then stay on the line that's of importance to them that's being read at the time. You can switch that off again if you don't wish to have it on. There we go, turn off there. And you could also have a picture dictionary. So for pupils, that's quite useful. So it could read the individual word, but if you've got something that has a picture in it, and not everything does, let's have a lockdown. Maybe there isn't a picture on any of these today. Let's try going. Yeah, there we got with going. You get the pictorial version, so you can have that there as well. So a lot of words have a pictorial dictionary attached to them too. Where it becomes really useful is you can get it translated into your native language. So in here, there's different languages. And what you can do is you can choose the languages in here and adjust that individually when you're reading it. Or as I'll show you in a bit in the settings, if you know the different languages of people that come to your school or parents that send children to your school, then you can instantly have them available as a drop down on the form, so they can choose it as a drop down and it will translate the whole form into their language, and they won't have to keep going into each individual question using Immersive Reader. So there's quite a bit of flexibility there about how you want to use that. But it's another thing that's a benefit because you can just produce the form once and then it can be differentiated depending on the person and their needs. That's how it would look for a computer. If you wanted to know how it would look on a mobile phone or a tablet, well, the other great thing about forms is it rescales automatically. So if they happen to open it up on their mobile phone or their tablet, it looks like this. And you don't need to produce two versions. It automatically switches in between, and Microsoft takes care of all the scaling for you and allows you to just amend that. You can, if you want, spice up the theme that you've got here. So the theme button at the top allows you just to pick a solid background. Maybe we've got school colors and our school colors are purple, so I'm going to apply that. It may be that you're going to use one of the themes that Microsoft have got in there for you. So we've got more of an officey type theme of people typing on a computer. But if none of those suit you, you can add a customized theme. You can choose the picture in the background and you can choose the color, and then that will apply. So then you've got an individualized, unique form for each purpose in your school. So you've got quite a bit of customization that you can do in there with themes. So I'm going to come out of themes and just leave that there so you can see how it's changed. It looks a bit more appealing instead of that very sterile, just solid single color. On the side here, you've got more settings, and then when you're ready to share your form, there's the share button. So we'll look at more settings first. If you wanted to have a multilingual form, this is where you add those other languages in. So if we knew that we had Polish, and we also know that we've got Dutch, let's say, and we've also got French. I'll choose France. So those now will appear as options at the top of the form, and I'll show you how that looks in a little bit. But if you ever want to get rid of them, you can edit them from there. If you want to rewrite that language, you can press the pencil and go in and edit what it's called. If you really wish to print the form, and I'd advise not unless you absolutely have to, but some people prefer paper, you can get a print preview, up it will come, and then you can get a printed out version. It will show you section 1 and section 2 and the different questions. I know some people prefer to review in paper, and that's fine. It will allow you to do that. But it's so easy to edit online. It's one of those things where you don't necessarily have to print it out, but the option is there. You can give feedback to Microsoft if you wish to, and that's the suggestions of features you think would be of benefit to you. They do listen, contrary to popular belief, and when they get enough requests for different features, they will start to build them in. So some of the features that have been added over the last 12 months have been as a direct result of people giving feedback. So it's not a meaningless thing to do. Do enter it into there. So there aren't too many settings to worry about. When you go to share, this is how you would get the form out to other people. Now, you've got a few options in here. The very top option is when you're going to send it out to somebody for them to complete it and for you to get some information back. You can choose from the drop-down menu at the top. Only people in your organization, and that would be only people in your school, could make a response. It's not going to be a lot of use if you're sending it externally at the school to go to parents. So you then change that to anyone can respond. And when they get the link, that means that they can go in with whatever email address or whatever browser they're using. There won't be any limits to it, and they'll be able to fill and complete the form. If you need to get a copy of the link to send to parents, you might be doing it inside Microsoft Teams, as we looked at on some of the previous sessions. You might be doing it in email, it might be in a newsletter, it might go on your website. So there's lots of scope about where you can put the links for these forms. So the first option you've got there is to get a link, and it's as simple as press the copy button, and then you can take the copied version of that link and you can paste it elsewhere. Another way to do this is that you can get QR codes. So if you aren't familiar with QR codes, they're like 3D barcodes. You can download a copy that comes out as A4 size by pressing the download button. And I've had great success with these, particularly during the previous COVID lockdowns and this one, either printing one of those and putting it on my classroom window or putting it facing outwards on reception and having it then with some text underneath. And parents can just walk up to the window. They can scan that QR code on their mobile phone or their tablet device. And then in their web browser, it will open up straight away on the forms page and they can complete the form. It's also really good in a classroom. You can put those up around. And if you've got devices that your pupils have cameras on in your classroom, be it tablets, or some people have convertible laptops with cameras on the back, you can just walk around the classroom, spread a few of those around, and pupils can be independent and going scanning those. And at whatever point in the lesson, you can then start to complete the questionnaire that the teacher's prepared. Another way of doing it is to embed the form in your website. So here you can see the width is going to be 640 pixels and the height is going to be 480 pixels. You can click on there and you can change the size of those. And then when you've got the form to display in the size you wish it to be, you copy it, you go to your website platform, you paste that code in, and then the form will get brought into your website. And most modern education website hosters now are able to handle that. There's only one or two left that don't. If you wish to email it, you can press the email button. It will open up whichever email software you use, and it will then insert that link into that email, and then away you go. You can email to an individual. Doesn't work well if you're doing it en masse. That's where it's better to use a link and then put it somewhere else for people to pick up. So the top options up here are for sharing your form and getting it out to others if you wish to get a response from them in some way, shape or form. But if you want to get a copy of this and give it to somebody else, because maybe you've spent hours making this form and you don't want to waste everyone else's time reinventing the wheel, well, what you can do is you can get a duplicate link. And then if you share that link to a colleague, that colleague will then get a copy of your original form, but then their copy they can amend and it won't destroy or overwrite your original. But sometimes you are doing exactly the opposite and you might want to collaborate with somebody, another teacher or someone in the admin team or leadership team. So if you copy that link there, as long as they've got an Office 365 account for your school, then you could send them that link, and then that will enable them to get into the authoring editing screen we're in now. And you could both be in there editing the form. You might be in different houses in other towns, but you could all be working on the same form, and it will all be saving automatically. And it's another way to work collaboratively without having to develop one copy, send it to another person, have them make their changes, have to send it back. You can just be in single version, and it's just easy. So there you share options, and you find them up there on the share button at the top. Before I go over and talk about responses or look at an example form, are there any questions from what we've covered so far in simply building a form to gather data? We will cover use of classroom quizzes in the second bit of the training. You can either paste those questions into the conversation, or you can unmute and speak with me if you wish. Nothing so far. All right, let's carry on, but I'll check back over there just to see if anything comes in from time to time. What we will do next is we'll look at a form I have already prepared, and in that form that I've already prepared, I will take you through the different question types, and then we'll look at how to get data out from responses that have been given to you. So to get back to your forms, is click the word forms at the top there, and it will bring you back to this page. You don't have to press backwards and forwards in the web browser. That's how you navigate around. So there it is. There's my wellbeing survey, and I can go back in there and I can re-edit it at any time I wish, or I can go to another form now. So I might say, look, I've got a questionnaire here, and it's going to be one of those ones where I just want to open it in a web browser. I can click the dots on the side and click open on the web browser, or do you know what? I just click it in the middle and it will do exactly the same. There's a funny little icon in here, which means that we've added branching, and that's the thing that we said we would come back to look at. I've also got a notification that there's 5 responses, and we'll look at how to submit a response and also then how to get data out of responses that you receive just in here. So for branching, in my key here, very similar to the one we just developed, it's asking about when I'm best at learning. And then in here, we've got branching options. So the branching options there are, if I go to add branching, it will then come into question 1. And it says, I'm either a morning or an afternoon. I didn't give the options that I just showed you on the version we built. And what you do is you select the box next to the answer. And if they answered morning, they jump straight to question 2 in order. Or if they answered afternoon, they skip what is question 2 in the form and they go straight to question 3. If they've gone to question 3, it won't say question 3 for them. It will simply display as question 2 because forms automatically adjust the ordering of the numbers of the questions that they see. And you can do that on pretty much any of the other questions here, depending on the type of question you've got going on. And then you can get people to branch out and go through the form in a different path. It doesn't have to be a linear journey through that form. You can get them to go in different directions depending on what they've answered previously. As soon as you finish with your branching options, you press the back, and then that little icon there is just reminding me that I've got branching active in this form. You can see here and here I've got section 1 again, and what I have is a set of questions there. So rather than go through what they look like from a building point of view, I'm now going to show you what they look like from the perspective of someone filling in. So I'm going to go to preview, and this is now imagining that I've come in here, been sent this form, I've opened it up on my device, and I'm going to submit this data back to school. Here is that multilinguals option in action there. This would convert into French, Dutch, or Polish. So that's now working for me. So instead of having to use that immersive reader to convert every individual piece, I can just convert the form en masse. And it wouldn't matter whether I'm using the web browser version or the mobile version, it's going to work exactly the same. So I'm just going to quickly whip through. So am I a morning or an afternoon person? I'm going to go afternoon. That then takes me over to why do I prefer in the afternoon. It might be I often often get bed after 10 a.m. so that's in there for the person who gets form. Rate this question. So that's the example of a text response question. In here is an example of a ratings question. So you can say rate the quality of the distance learning that the school's been providing during lockdown, and you give it a rating as stars. You can change the number of stars. It doesn't have to be just 5. You can make it more or less. You could also give date examples. So this is useful for if you were booking for things like parents' evenings or open evenings. You could say, well, which date would you prefer to come on? And they have to put in there, well, I'd like to come on Friday the 12th, and then that locks a date in. You can have ranking questions where you rank things. So here it's the preference of the lessons. So I might say, do you know what? Maths is the thing that I prefer the most, and then it's going to be science, and then down there at the bottom is English. But if I made a mistake and actually English was my second choice, I can move it around. So you can re-rank the statements that you're giving to them, and then they can be independent in doing that. You can also have a ratings question. So on a ratings question, it might be here are my 3 disciplines in science. And I might say, well, as far as my learning and how secure it is, I might be emerging, expected, or mastery. Well, I think, do you know what? I'm quite good at biology. So I might say, well, I'm assessing myself as mastery. Chemistry, I might only be emerging, but I'm pretty much expected in physics. You can get what's called a net promoter score, which looks a bit like a dial that promotes from red to green when we go and look at the results. So you can ask people how likely they are to do something and get them to rate themselves. So I might say, well, I'm quite open to things today. I'm going to say I'm an 8. And you could also use forms to upload files, and you can control the size of the file. So here I've said that I'm only going to allow files to be submitted that are 100 megabytes, and I'll allow these file types. The uploads then go into your OneDrive. For those people that haven't used OneDrive before, that replaces your personal area on the server, and all of your files and folders can be kept in there. They're private to you, and you won't need to have a server area, or you wouldn't need to have an area on your computer, or you also wouldn't need to have a USB stick or an external hard drive anymore, because it can all get kept in your OneDrive and you can access it from absolutely anywhere. So I'm not going to upload a file. It says here this is page 1 of 2 because it's section 1 of 2, so it's guiding me. I haven't had to look at too many questions in one go. It's splitting them up like we discussed at the beginning. I go to next, and then, do you know what? Whoever created this in the school has missed out putting a question here. It's just an empty section 2, so I've got to submit. And then I'm going to submit that in, and I can have a response note on there that says, thank you very much for submitting your response. You can choose whether you want people to submit another response or not as well. So if I come back out and I go back over here, this is the questions tab that I can edit the questions in, but also because I own this form, I can get to the responses tab. In the responses tab, it tells me I've had 6 responses. That's the average time for somebody to complete this form. And it tells me that the form status is active. Here I can see a summary. It's the mean of all of the data I've got in, and it tells me how many people are morning, how many people are afternoon. It just gives me some feedback on each question, so it starts to give me the mean of the responses that have been submitted there. I can see a split of what people say around whether they're mastery, expected, exceeding on their subjects. Here's that net promoter score, so I can see I'm above 50% over there for people that think that they are likely to try something today, but I've got 0 upload responses. I might not want to view that here as a whole summary, so if I click the view results button, I can scroll through, and it happens to be me that submitted all these because I'm the person that owns this form, but it will say different names depending on the person that submitted. You could scroll through and then see what an individual person answered, instead of having to see the summary. If you want to get back to view results, just press the back button and it's there. Now, it's all well and good viewing it here in Forms, but you might want to manipulate that data or do some more analysis on it. So you've got the option there to open and export the answers to the questions in Excel, and then you can do things like graph responses or pull apart the responses in a bit more detail in different ways using formulas in Excel. So although you're gathering in Forms, you can then do some further analysis over there. With the questions that are there, let me just go over to this one and go into settings. I realise I stepped past the settings button in the other window. You're probably wondering where some of those responses and those options that I showed you are. Who can fill in this form? So anyone can respond, or only people in my organisation, and it does say whether it's going to make them make a compulsory record of their name. Options for responses, that you can accept responses. You can have a start date. So if you click a start date or an end date, you can choose when it's available from and to. So a window of completion of that form will open and close if you want to control that, or whether you just want to have it accepting responses or not, or you can turn it off. You can also shuffle questions in here. That progress bar that I showed you at the bottom of the screen is 1 of 2. You can have that there, or you can hide it. And then the response receipts are there so that you can get an email notification to you each time a response is submitted into the form. So you don't have to keep coming back and checking and wondering whether you've now got 7 responses instead of 6s. And you can also put a customized thank you message in there. So your response was submitted as the default, but you can put it in whatever you like in the text, and that could give them a description of why you're happy they've given their data or what's going to happen next, so that it doesn't mean they're going to contact the school and say, well, I've put my form in, but what's going to happen with that and when am I going to hear back? You could put an answer in there so that you avoid having any more inquiries about obvious questions like that. So that is in there, and that's in all wound up in the settings. So that's Microsoft Forms for data collection. It can be used in so many different ways across the whole school, and it's extremely flexible. We said we talk about professional versions. So at the moment, most people will be using standard licensing for Office 365, but you can upgrade your license in Office 365 to get what's called a professional version of Microsoft Forms. And then what it will give you is more question choices, and it will also give you more editing options on a question. So more than just branching and so forth, when you've got the arrows down here, you can have the ability to push out to other Office 365 apps. So it might be somebody answers a question and then you actually want them to email you. Well, one of the actions that will happen at the end of submitting that question or submitting that form is it might open up their email for them, and then with it pre-filled an address for the schooling office for inquiries. Or it might be that it says, I'd like you to create a document that describes something, and then it will automatically trigger opening up Word in the web browser. So that's the Pro version. That's not available in this version, but it depends on how much of a power user you're going to end up being in Microsoft Forms. The other thing that we said we would show you this afternoon in Microsoft Forms is using it in the classroom. So in here, I've got what's called a quiz, and that's where you start a new quiz or make a quiz. Just for the sake of time, I've got one that I've already made. The options along the top, the preview, the theme, the share buttons, and the settings are the same. So there's not really anything in there that I need to show you again. The responses work in exactly the same way, and this is what it looks like when you haven't had any responses at all. So I haven't yet shared this with the class. I'm building this as a teacher. There's my title, and I can click on it and I can re-edit it if I wish. This is going to be a quiz all about STEM subjects. It's got a mixture of science and maths and technology in here. You can, just like on the other side, you can have the same types of questions, the multiple choices what I've got here, so about an obtuse angle being less or greater than 90 degrees. The other thing that you can do in here that you can't do in a form that you can do in a quiz, you can signify what the correct answer is, so that when a pupil completes the quiz that's sent to them, it's self-marking. So to reduce workloads on teachers, they would need to take some time to make the form, because unfortunately there's not this big library of pre-made forms. You do need to make your own, although you can share with colleagues. So if you've made one and you know someone else is doing the same homework, then send them the form link and allow them to edit yours instead of having to waste hours of their time making their own. But you can signify what the correct answer is by ticking there, so that would say, oh, well, actually that's the correct answer, or that's the correct answer. You can also add in some text message there to say, congratulations, this is correct, and then for extension work please visit, and then you could put a address in there for a website. And those sorts of things are really powerful, particularly in the classroom, for you being able to edit your work in advance, for you being able to pair this and then free you to move around the classroom if you're doing it during the lesson. But also it means you've got one less homework to mark if you're a teacher. And additionally, if you're delivering distance learning, you can send these quizzes directly in Microsoft Teams. You can either put them in posts, or you can link them with assignment homeworks. And again, it takes care of that for you. So there is an investment in time of building these, but once you've got them as a school, share them around and you can really reduce workload. In here is the example of, I've used a picture to say for computing, well, what does that algorithm, that computational piece of instruction there, tell you? And then down here, the pupil would give me the answer. I've decided it's going to be a long answer and it's also going to be required. Could swap those pictures over again by going to that library. Here's an example of ordering melting of water, so the water cycle, and then boiling and evaporation and condensation again back to liquid water. There's a picture about the water cycle, and you can just carry on merrily building just like you would on the other side. and that's an example where you can embed videos in. So this video I've just lifted out of, I think I took it from BBC Bitesize, or you could take it from YouTube, and you can put the link in and away you go. The way that that looks, so if I went to a text-based question in here, instead of using an image, you can either go find that video separately, or you can click on videos there, and it might be here, I don't know, Scratch coding. Scratch is a program you use. Microsoft couldn't find anyone right now, so there's a URL link there. It's not finding it left, but I could go over to here, and I could go to there, and let's type in Scratch coding, and there's a video for Scratch coding. Go in there, get the share link from Scratch coding. It's embedded there. It's like it goes to YouTube. Get the share link, copy the share link.
As soon as I shared my first project, I got instant feedback.
Let's and I was just like, pause that lady there. It's clearly really enthusiastic. I paste that link into there, and I press add, and then all of a sudden there's my Scratch video there. So could this be a question now about Scratch and coding again? So it's quite quick and easy to build as a teacher. You can have your own themes again. You can go custom if you want to for different subjects in the school. And then as the pupils submit their responses, it works in exactly the same way as the other Microsoft form. You can export as a teacher into Excel to do some class analysis. Maybe you're trying to find where you've got either gaps in learning for the whole class or specific pupils, but it will all display there with the same graphs and charts that you had over in the other version. And it's then one of those things where you can keep them and you can use them in future years. They don't disappear out of your forms library unless you decide to delete them. So what you're doing is building up another library of resources that you can use across the school. As far as the training is concerned this afternoon, the two main functions there are exactly those, either quizzes specifically for classroom reasons, or forms, which are hidden up there in the arrow, which could be for classrooms. It could be used surveying, I don't know, for a science inquiry, you want to gather some responses, or you might be using a form to engage with parents or survey staff. There's lots of different ways to use it. It's really powerful, but very simplistic in the way that it's laid out. Don't be scared of it. The worst that can happen is that you create a form and it's a load of gobbledygook, and all you need to do is come back in here and either remove it from the list if you're there, or to delete it permanently, you go back to all my forms, click on the dot there, and you just press delete. And as I said, it will go back into your bin there. There isn't a lot more to show you today, but I am very happy to take any questions that you wish to ask me before I share you the link for the code in order to get your accreditation to become a certified MIE. So I can see there's a question over here in the conversation. I created a quiz for my class the other week. I shared the link in Teams as part of the lesson assignment. However, quite a number of them said that the form wouldn't open for them. Why would this be? Usually that wouldn't be the restriction in form. That's probably something to do with the way that the pupil accounts are set up in Teams, and a restriction in there rather than in forms. And there's loads of policies in Teams that allow pupils to do things or not do things. So I would guess that they've either got, so in Microsoft Teams, you can have other apps that link in. So Forms would be one of those apps that link in. So it could be that they've got no ability to use other apps in Office 365, it would be my guess. If you need to get that changed, whoever does your IT support, whether it's Turn It On or another IT company, it's usually a policy that you would change in what's called Teams Admin Center, and over there that usually updates. I would be amazed if it was just a Forms issue. I've not seen that anywhere else. Any other questions at all? It is a bit strange that some of them could do it. So sometimes when student accounts or pupil accounts are created for teams and class teams, I have seen it in the background that sometimes some get created as a group of pupils with certain permissions, and sometimes you get a second group which pupils fall into which have restricted permissions, or sometimes I've seen pupils get created and sometimes put into staff restricted areas as well. So it is worth getting someone to check on the back end, because you may have had pupils that have got different permissions and they do exist in the same class team. I have seen that as well, and it's very annoying because you'd expect them all to have the same permissions because they're in your team, but then actually there might be different restriction policies that apply in teams. Any more questions from anybody here? No. Okay. Well, the place to go to now would be the Microsoft Education Center. I will post into the chat the code that you can use to redeem, and do feel free